think that your participation this evening shows your interest in the city hiring for this important position of police chief. Your involvement this evening will help ensure that we hire the very best chief to lead the department in the coming years. The primary reason that we're having this public presentation this evening is, as you know, the police chief is a very high-profile public position. You see the police chief out in the community, getting involved, very well-respected individual and very involved in the community. This individual is hired to serve the public and make sure that Fredericksburg continues to be a very safe community for each of us and our families. Effective public safety is a critical community asset that we all enjoy, and it is one of the primary goals of your city government. Several of you have already given us your input on the police chief recruitment process. You've sent in emails, you've sent in, you've called, given us comments, and your comments have been very helpful to date. In fact, a lot of your comments were used to prepare the job profile for your police chief position. And your comments and questions this evening will help guide us through the continuation of this process. One of the things I wanted to note, if you haven't received a copy of this, there's copies of this available at the back door. And this will tell you a little bit about some of the traits and characteristics that we're looking for in the police chief. It will also describe why we're at this point in the recruitment due to the retirement of our current chief, Chief Wetz, after serving the community for a total of 35 years. So before we continue, let's give Chief Wetz a round of applause. Chief, while you're done. I have received two questions over the last week that I want to respond to tonight before I introduce the chief. The first question is, why are we focused only on internal candidates at this time for our position? And the second question is, what is the hiring process that will take place after tonight's presentation? How will we go about hiring a new police chief? So let me answer both those questions before I introduce the police chief. So many of you may be aware that the city of Fredericksburg has adopted an award-winning employee succession plan. This plan was prepared and adopted several years ago when we realized that many of our employees in leadership positions were over 55 years old. Many of these employees were scheduled for retirement over the next several years due to their age and tenure with the city. This included the city manager, several department heads such as the police chief, fire chief, and our former IT director. It also included supervisors like solid waste manager and our street superintendent. So we recognized that it was going to be, we wanted to be proactive in getting ready for these retirements. And we also recognized that it was going to be a real challenge to bring people from outside of Fredericksburg into our community. They didn't understand the culture here, they didn't understand the history of the community, and not only that is they would find it very expensive to move here. So for all those reasons, we developed a succession plan for these key positions, showing how we might fill them in the coming years. First step in the plan, we followed a needs assessment where we went out and we polled our employees and we determined who was planning on retiring and leaving the city. And then we began to identify future leaders in our organization. Fortunately, in the city of Fredericksburg, we've got some good young employees that many of you know that I think will advance to leadership positions over the next 5 to 10 years. So we begin to identify these people and get them prepared for leadership positions. Once we identify these future leaders, we begin getting them training. We recognize that some of these individuals had not had leadership training, had not had budget training, and other skills necessary to advance to promotional positions. So we conducted a lot of training, both in-house training and external training. It's just one example. I conduct training every year, leadership training for employees that want to move up to positions. Currently, I have 14 employees in leadership training this year. In addition to that, Chief Wetz took a major role in starting to assign more and more responsibilities to some of the individuals in his department that he knew wanted to grow and advance to positions. Some of these responsibilities were new challenges that they assumed, and he was able to evaluate them and see how they did in assuming these more challenging opportunities. So he's done a really good job in preparing the individuals that you will meet this evening that are competing for this position. Once you hear from these three individuals this evening, I think you will be impressed and agree with the city particularly Chief Wetz, has done a great job in preparing these individuals for the police chief position. They understand the community and the culture of the department. They are well-trained and well-rounded individuals, and they are dedicated to leading the department in the future. So following this evening's presentation, where we will, the next couple of weeks, what will happen is, first off, the 3 finalists that you'll meet this evening, they will be subject to an interview by an interview panel made up of 7 individuals. Those interviews will be held on April 27th. The interview panel includes 4 current city employees and 3 individuals that have a law enforcement background that will get more into their law enforcement skills and training and ask questions regarding public safety and law enforcement. Then following these interviews, the new city manager, Clint Bailey, will select the new police chief on or around May 1st, shortly after May 1st. And the reason we're doing this is this will allow the newly selected police chief an opportunity to work with the current Chief Wetz for a number of months and ensure that we have a smooth transition process. So I don't know about you, but I'm excited to hear from the 3 individuals we have seated in front, hear what they have to say this evening. And again, we welcome your questions as we proceed through this evening's meeting. So at this point, I'm going to introduce Chief Wetz, and he has a few comments, and then we'll get started with the presentations. Chief Wetz.
Thank you, Ken. I'm going to try to keep it really brief because I know you all want to hear what they have to say, not what I have to say. The last time got me. But just to give you a little background, I started here when I was 21 years old, and the community of Fredericksburg made me feel at home the very first day I stepped into camp. And so I made it a point in my career over the years to try and give back to the community as much as I could. I worked really hard at making connections with people and programs and doing things in the community. And you know, the people who I went to work with took me under their wing, they took me into their house, they fed me dinner, you know, many nights. And it wasn't just about, you know, the new guy, it was about bringing someone else in to become part of this family that we have. Over the years, I've worked, and so I've been here 38 years. I've worked, a lot of you may not know, I worked in narcotics for about 3 years. 2 years of it, I worked for the DEA task force, and I saw a lot of other departments around San Antonio and the Hill Country. And then I worked for our judicial task force for a year, which took me around to different counties and things around the community. I saw these different departments and how they operate, and it kind of gave me the nudge to understand that, you know, policing is different everywhere you go. And it's important that you learn how to police people in your own community. And because they're the ones that you're working for. So making them feel comfortable, making them feel that they can trust you is very, very important. So the reason you have these fine individuals here today is because I made it a point in my career to get those guys the training that they wanted and that they needed to move up and take over this position someday and continue to build that trust in the community. So that's kind of why I did what I did. I think we have some fine individuals here. One of them, you know, was pretty much raised around me. The other 2 came to work for me, and I put them on a baseball team the first night. We used to do a softball game every year to raise money, and we played the coaches. I don't know if some of you may remember that, but so we were short players that year. They came in for their interviews, and I asked one of the questions in their interview was, "Can you play softball and baseball?" And so after we got through the interviews, they went and got some sweatpants and tennis shoes, and they came and played on the team with us that night. So again, making them family and making them part of the community instead of working for themselves. That's about where I'm going to let off. And thank all of y'all for what you've done over the years. Thank you for meeting those challenges and rising to them. You know, there's an old saying, the cream rises to the top. But when you have a whole department full of cream, it's hard to pick from. So if you have 3 guys up here, they're going to let you know all about them and what they can do. So I want to say thank you to Kent and to Clinton both for the opportunity that they've given me in the last 9 years. Working as a police chief, and I'm up with there.
Okay, thank you, Steve, again. If you could join me in another round of applause for both Steve and So again, we'll get into the bulk of the presentation tonight. Thank you again for being here. This is a very important decision, a very important process that we're going through. As Ken mentioned, this is a multi-part process that actually started back in February, and it will end up in October. So a 9-month process that we're going through with internal candidates. We go through the same process regardless of how we were interviewing and hiring the position. So we take this very seriously. We have 3 wonderful men up here, and just FYI, these guys told me that they're really nervous right now. Can you believe they look so cool under pressure? You can almost feel like we need to stand up and do some jumping jacks or something like that. I think we'll hold off. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight if you're interested in the position. So I think everybody had the opportunity to pick up a comment card at the front. The way we're going to do this, each candidate is going to be given 10 minutes to provide background on themselves, their experience in the department, their thoughts on law enforcement, city of Fredericksburg. They're going to talk about whatever they're going to talk about in terms of background for 10 minutes. After that, I have a number of questions that I have received from staff. You are also welcome to submit a question. The way we would like to do that is our public information officer over here by the speaker, Lee Forney, is going to collect the comment forms, the question forms, and we're going to look for themes in the questions. Themes in the questions, and those will be submitted to me. I'll run through those as we're listening to the presentations here. And I may ask 2 or 3 additional questions. If I don't ask your question, we are going to log all of this information and use it at some point during the process. So your input is valuable, if not tonight, from this point moving forward as well. So again, your interest here, the fact that you're here shows me that you're interested in this position. We have a lion's share of police department. I hope you guys have somebody covering for all the guys that are in there. Yeah, what's going on out here at the golf course. So thank you again for being here. With that, I'm just going to go in straight alphabetical order. We had this discussion as well. My last name is Bailey. So I've always been close to the top. So I think these guys are used to that at this point. I don't want any surprises. So we are going to lead off the presentations with Chris Ayala. Chris.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for being here tonight. And for those of y'all who are watching from live stream, again, also welcome. For those of y'all who do not know me, my name is Chris Ayala, and I have worked with the Fredericksburg Police Department for the last 23 years and for the city of Fredericksburg. I do have a combined total law enforcement experience of 29 years, and that's what I'm going to share with you this evening. Now, when I became a policeman, I always want to talk about the first person to make the most impression to me when I was an 8-year-old boy. I was born and raised in a small town of Jordan, Texas, and when I walked into this gas station, there was a DPS trooper that was standing there. And I'll never forget how I immediately reached up because I saw this trooper, and he garnished my respect just by the way he was dressed in his uniform. And I remember staring at him and him looking at me, and the next thing I knew, he actually asked me, "Have you ever seen the side of a police car?" And I said, "No, sir." And David Bradshaw, Trooper Bradshaw, went above and beyond and actually took me out to the police car. Now, you got to imagine this was back when I was 8 years old, and some of you in this room will understand. But when he took me to his police car, it only had 2 toggle switches. One for the lights, with the 2 bubblegum machine lights that were on both sides of the patrol car, and then the other was for the siren. And he actually allowed me to activate both of them as an 8-year-old boy. And what he didn't realize was he instilled the respect that I still value today as a police officer. And I have worked my entire 29 years to gain and maintain that respect as a police officer in a uniform. I will always tell police officers, it's easy to get the uniform and wear the badge, but it's 10 times harder to keep it. Now, I started off my law enforcement career in South Texas, and I'm going to tell you that as a young police officer, when I first started, and most of you law enforcement have been in for a long time, the only way to get hired was to work as a reserve deputy for free to gain experience. And so that's what I did for the city of Floresville, Texas. I was working for Floresville, and I remember going in my first night.
I wasn't even sure if I was supposed to have a bullet in my barrel as a police officer. I remember asking the other officers about that. And at that point, they told me that yes, I was supposed to. And then I hopped into a vehicle with my then partner, Don Shaw. Within an hour, we found ourselves in a high-speed pursuit. So my first night in uniform, first night to carry a gun, and I find myself in a high-speed pursuit. Now, combined total law enforcement in that patrol car was about 2 hours. So we chased this individual 16 miles towards Stockton, Texas. He eventually would crash out, and we would eventually get out of our car. 2 officers stared at each other again, now about an hour and 15 minutes of combined law enforcement experience. We finally made the arrest. And it was on that night, on my very first night to wear uniform, that I solidified my idea that my law enforcement career had just begun. Now, I would later leave Floresville to eventually go to Pleasanton, Texas, where I would work as a patrol officer. And I would eventually work for the Wilson County Sheriff's Department. I would like to consider those 6 years of law enforcement in South Texas my formative years. In those years, I've learned everything that could possibly have done for a police officer. I was in high-speed pursuits that ranged all the way to Corpus Christi to San Antonio, Texas. I chased cars all over multiple counties, and I even was involved in pursuits where shots were being fired. Now, for a 24, 25-year-old male, that was exactly what I call living the dream. Now, part of the law enforcement career that I had was I had many great men that mentored me along the way. And I honestly will say this, if you've never met them, I can assure you that if you hung out with me long enough, you would see them in every aspect of my career, and the respect that they gave me and the respect that I continue to give the community of Fredericksburg, Texas. Now, when I was working for Wilson County, I worked for a very great individual by the name of Joe Tackett. I had a lot of respect for that man. When I worked for the Wilson County Sheriff's Department, I experienced a lot of major adversity as a police officer, as a deputy. In 1996, I was involved in my first officer-involved shooting, where unfortunately a man had taken his children, were technically holding him hostage, and at some point we attempted to try to make him surrender. But unfortunately, he decided to lower his shotgun towards me, and I made a life or death decision. And unfortunately, I took a man's life at the age of 27. Wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do as a cop anymore. I thought maybe this was a bad idea. But again, Sheriff Tackett, with his big giant hands of South Texas, lifted me up, asserted me to say, along with the different members of my department, to stick it out, which, as you can see, I'm very proud and happy that I did. Now, that would be one of multiple shootings that I've been involved in as a police officer since I started. Now, one of the most interesting things that happened in 1997, also working for the same Sheriff Department. I hit a horse. I was on routine patrol, traveling through Floresville, Texas, and Stockton, Texas, and apparently a horse came out toward me, and I did not know that it was there, and I hit it. I ran into the back end of the horse, so as you look at me today, I can honestly say I'm the only person you're going to meet that has kissed the horses behind and lived to tell about it. Now, I went through a lot more adversity. I lost my teeth, I had facial reconstruction, my chest had to be rebuilt, but you know what? I'm still here today, and I will continue another 20 plus years of law enforcement. So because when I first had directed the contemplation that I wouldn't be a police officer, and when you tell a person that he's about to give up something, he's very passionate and that he loves very much, it is a challenge. And so I met that challenge by committing to myself that I would do everything I could to return back to uniform and be a patrol deputy. Now, I have had a charmed life. So my very first night back to work, Sheriff told me I was just to patrol, not take calls. Within about 15 minutes, at 6:15, 15 minutes after, I was involved in another high-speed pursuit. And again, the sheriff later asked me what part of not getting involved could you do. Now, when I think of my career in South Texas, and I eventually put everything together, if there was anything that I learned in South Texas being a sheriff's deputy, was adversity. But the other thing that I learned was the community. When I was involved in most of these situations, I cannot begin to tell you how the South Texas community rallied behind me. The letters that I received from all over different communities and counties that I was working in, and the different counties. So I knew the community was important. And then in 1999, I was invited by then Sergeant Ayala to apply for the City of Fredericksburg Police Department. And when I moved here, I only knew 3 people, but I would later marry a local girl. And then I went from being, I only know 3 people, but I would marry a local girl and find myself related to everybody but those 3 people. I found my life here in Fredericksburg, Texas, because when I first moved here, I said to people, if you would like anyone to volunteer for help, please let me know. And before I got back to my house, the phone had already had a message, and I began mentoring at the local elementary school. And it has been an endeavor from the time that I started, I still carry today, 23 years later. And in 2000, I was given the opportunity to start as a teacher / SRO at Fredericksburg High School. Now, my father used to tell me, you need to be a teacher. And I said, Dad, I don't even like the teachers I have now. And so at that point, in 2000, my dad would pass away. In 1981, I watched my father receive the Man of the Year award for his community service and all his effort that he made in the community of Jordan, Texas. And in 2020, I was able to follow my father's footsteps when I received the Fredericksburg Chamber of Commerce Public Servant of the Year for my outstanding service to the public. So you have to understand it was instilled to me as a young man, not when I became a police officer, but it was instilled in me by my father and many men that I admired did just what he did. Now, when I moved to Fredericksburg, the fact that I was new, that I didn't really know a lot of people. But let me tell you what, when you work with youth, if you know one person, you know both their parents, you know their grandparents, you eventually start to meet everyone. I dove in. Community service was my project. I eventually talked to students and said, look, you are getting a free education. The city supports the program. We have to learn how to give back. And I can't even begin to list how many projects that the program that I started when I took over 22 years ago has helped the community. My favorite, and always will be my favorite, project that the students created and ran with was a Special Olympics fundraiser. We were able to bring the first Special Olympics torch run to Fredericksburg, Texas, which lasted for 3 years. There are many, many more that I can possibly imagine that I can't really share with you tonight, I would love to share with you at some point though. Now, the next thing that would happen was as a teacher, I found myself learning more and more about youth and learning more and more about teenagers. But I was also encountering more and more about the laws of juveniles, which when you mess with an adult, you mess with the adult. But when you mess with a juvenile, you mess with the entire family. And there's a whole different way of how you handle the juvenile laws. Now, most people ask me, Chris, why have you not promoted to the ranks of Fredericksburg Police Department? It has purely been by choice. Because when the opportunities arose, the first thing I was told that if I was promoted, I would have to leave the schools. My heart was there, and that's why I chose to stay. However, while inside the school, I took the time to develop a safety program that I would later call ACT. That ACT program is for Active Crisis Continuing Training is how we respond to active shootings in our schools, not just as teachers and educators to protect our students, but how law enforcement will respond to same incident. I was able to take that, and now I have taught that in multiple schools throughout the state of Texas. So when I think about the idea that I didn't promote, I did have a mission. Now, when the opportunity arose for me to consider the chief of police, I was currently working with 2 different officers, and one of them is Jonathan Prado, who, along with 21 officers that have taken my program, I believe I helped cultivate to become police officers in the city limits of Fredericksburg, County of Gillespie, and to work for multiple agencies such as the probation office and different things. I even have one former student who's currently on the governor detail as a bodyguard working for Governor Abbott at this time. I feel like what I've done with the students of Fredericksburg to make them commit to the community is important. So what they do for the community is solid and it should always be. Now, I'll throw in one thing. I always made a commitment to hard work, and it was always something that we all agreed that would have to happen. Hard work to your community will always be worth every ounce of it. Now, Chief Wetz has always been actively promoted, and our discussion has always been, can I stay in the school? And the answer has always been, no, you would have to leave the school. And for the past 15 years, even though I have not been a supervisor, I have maintained the safety of the schools. I have worked with the schools on all categories of everything, ranging from felony types of arrests of educators. But the most important thing I've done for myself as a police officer is I've been able to work with families. I can't even begin to tell you or imagine the differences in the parts of life as an educator / SRO. When you work with these parents, when they lost a child that was a teenager, or you're standing in an ER with a student that has passed away, you're sitting there with the parents holding their hands. But when you have a family member of a child, student that is actually come to their house because they're wishing they don't know what to do, and to stand in those living rooms, those ERs, I never imagined the impact of my responsibility as an SRO. I love Fredericksburg, Texas, and it is my community. And I hope that if you took the time to look at my resume, you can see that without a doubt and beyond any question, I am committed to the city of Fredericksburg, Texas. I've been doing so since day one. If I look at all the ideas that I have put together with students, it is not a one-sided commitment. I told my students, I will provide the ability and empower you with the opportunity to succeed. But most importantly, I will give you the opportunity to make a difference and to be significant in the community that we call Fredericksburg, Texas. Now, I want to tell you this real quick. I could not have done this without the support of an awesome family. I'm married to a beautiful woman who was born and raised in Christian Fire. I'm a proud father of 4 boys and 1 beautiful daughter. I am blessed, and I hope to continue to carry those blessings if I was given the opportunity to be your future chief of police. I promise that there will be nothing less that you will receive from me, but it's 100% solid, solidified as a law enforcement officer and a member of this community that is committed to each and every one of you. But most importantly, I will be committed to the law enforcement officers that would work for the Fredericksburg Police Department, because their commitment is equally as important to the commitment of the community. Thank you.
Great job, Chris. Next, Braxton Roemer.
Yes, if you believe what Chief Wetz just said, the only reason I got hired here is so I could get on first base. But, no, that Chris and I both started here, and he mentioned the 3 people he knew, and I was one. So I stayed close to my crew. I'll start with that. First off, I would like to thank everyone for being here. I would like everyone to know how appreciative I am to be considered for the position. I was raised in Floresville, Texas, where I started my career in law enforcement in 1997. In 1999, I moved to Fredericksburg and accepted a position with the Fredericksburg Police Department, and I've been here ever since. In 2000, I married my wife, Allison. She's actually sitting in the back. Shortly after moving to Fredericksburg, and we have a son, Kurt, who is 17 years old and attends Fredericksburg High School. I spent most of my career in patrol, and I took my first leadership role by field training new officers. In 2003, I was promoted to my first formal leadership role as a patrol sergeant. During the promotional process, I was told that one of the assessors of my promotion board, who was a chief from another agency, commented that he thought I would be a chief of police one day. After giving it some thought, I decided that this would be my career goal, and I've worked towards this goal from that point forward. To achieve my goal, I knew I needed to further my education. So I completed a bachelor's degree in applied arts and science at Midwestern State University in 2007, and a master's degree in criminal justice leadership and management from Sam Houston State University in 2019. I obtained both degrees with a perfect 4.0 GPA, and at Midwestern State University, I received the President's Medal of Excellence for having the highest grade point average in my graduating class. Additionally, I'm also a graduate of the Law Enforcement Management Institute of Texas Leadership Command College in class number 78. This is Texas's premier law enforcement executive development program. In 2014, I promoted into a command level leadership role as a special services lieutenant. In this role, I specialized in managing our department's accreditation program, training, evidence room, community outreach, our animal control division, grant writing, policy manual, as well as command level decision making. Over the course of my career, I've had the opportunity to create many programs and accomplish many achievements for our department and community. Some of the most notable that I am most proud of include the creation of our Blue Santa program that helps provide needy families in our community a Christmas meal. Since 2011, I've served as the program manager for the Texas Police Chiefs Association Recognition Program and have helped the department achieve accredited status in 2013 and have maintained it ever since. As the program manager, I've developed and written all the department's policies and procedures and our general orders manual. I also serve as an assessor for the Texas Police Chiefs Association, and I assess other law enforcement agencies in Texas that wish to become accredited as well. I assisted in the development and management of the Special Services Division's budget, as well as the department's forfeiture funds. I've created an employee career development program for the department to help develop our employees, help them achieve their career goals by creating short, medium, and long-range goals, from surveys and interviews with the officer and their supervisor, And based off of these surveys and interviews, a career and development map is created for each officer in our department. And I'd like to give a lot of credit to Sergeant Seeley for standing in the back. He's helped with that program a lot. I've worked with our human resource department and was able to develop a workable salary step program for our department. Since taking over the evidence room, I revamped the system to ensure greater accountability and tracking the property and custody of the police department. I have successfully recruited and vetted most of our officers working in our department, selecting those officers that share our values of our department and community. I'm a certified instructor and have taught for over 10 years to our department, other departments, and the public. I currently serve on the Alamo Area Council of Governments Regional Emergency Preparedness Advisory Committee to help improve cooperation with other agencies and disseminate grant funds to benefit the region. I have successfully written and managed grants within the department. I have coordinated many community outreach programs or projects to include our summer youth program, our Blue Santa program, our Citizens Police Academies. Lastly, I recently took on the task of the new police department and municipal court project. I assembled a team of stakeholders in the project, and through the request qualifications process, we have selected an architect and are currently in the process of updating our space study and moving into conceptual design. If selected as the chief of police, my top priorities are to keep the community safe, enforce the laws, prevent crime, very important, treat people with respect and professionalism, and to be transparent. I believe we've been successful in many of these priorities. Fredericksburg is routinely in the top 50 safest cities in Texas. However, we will continue to strive to be better. We accomplish this by recruiting and retaining officers that are intelligent and support our values. By developing and educating our officers to be competent and as prepared as they can be. By providing leadership that offers clear direction and promotes our culture. And meaningful change. Meaningful change comes from looking forward to the future, finding more efficient and effective ways to provide services, and growing the department to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Lastly, Fredericksburg is a unique community that poses its own challenges. As Fredericksburg continues to grow, it is no longer the sleepy town of yesterday. Therefore, the police department will provide services with modern techniques and technologies, but will never deviate from the small town feel that we are known for. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Braxton. And last will be Brian Vorauer. Brian.
Good evening, everybody. I would like to thank the mayor, council, city staff, the community, and especially my family. Unfortunately, my parents weren't able to be here this evening. They took a trip to Pennsylvania to visit my mom. Hopefully, they're watching YouTube. Awesome technology. Just want to say hi to mom and dad. So, good evening. My name is Brian Vorauer. I was born and raised in Fredericksburg and married my high school sweetheart of 22 years. Place. We have two children, Brianna and William. Brianna currently attends ACS and Living Well Learning here in Fredericksburg, and William is a freshman at Texas A&M studying history. We attend St. Mary's Catholic Church and volunteer in the community as a family. This town is our home, and I have served it in my country selflessly for over 20 years. My service to the community started at home. Everything started with mom and dad, which came from their parents, grandma and grandpa, and all of that. Service to the community was something instilled in them that they instilled in us. Serving the community started at home and carried over to St. Mary's School, and then into Boy Scouts, as my dad led my brother and I through that adventure. My Eagle Scout project consisted of making marking valuable items with personal identification numbers for individuals in a retirement community here in Fredericksburg on Highway Street. The information was then logged by the police department. Those items were stolen. We could identify them and return them to the community, those individuals in need. Before graduating from Fredericksburg High School, I joined the Texas Army National Guard in the delayed entry program. After graduation, I attended basic training and started my military service. I began my career in law enforcement working for the Gillespie County Sheriff's Office. I was interviewed by Mel Young and Mel Gideon. And I remember Mel Gideon during the interview telling me, is law enforcement black or white? And I remember replying, it's gray. All decisions that we have to make are those decisions come with consideration for the individual and for the community that you're in serve. In 2002, I took a position with the Fredericksburg Police Department when my father retired. My father retired in 2002 after serving the Fredericksburg Police Department for over 24 years. He started his career here in 1978 and retired as a patrol sergeant. So my interest in law enforcement obviously came from not only my father, my grandfather, provost marshal, full board colonel, and my uncle, my dad's brother, was a San Antonio police officer and rode motorbikes for years and years and years. When Chief talks about family, I remember growing up inside the agency as a young boy, following my father around to family functions, law enforcement Christmases, and all, and the police Olympics where he did competition and shoot pistol, and then into community functions where I saw the police department in the 80s and the 90s serving the community. And that's something that has been ingrained and instilled in me throughout my career, service in the community. I was deployed to Iraq in 2004 through 2006, serving as a convoy commander. Our duties were escorting supplies, weapons, troops, you name it, across the country during combat. And then I deployed again to Kuwait in 2013, serving as a platoon sergeant, completing 2 seasons of combat tours. During that time in Kuwait, I was the platoon sergeant and was in charge of 24 individuals, 24/7, 365. My immediate command was halfway across the country, and we reached them by vehicle or by flight. That was one of my biggest challenges, the greatest accomplishment. Serving those 24 individuals day and night, and making sure that every single one of them returned home. During my military career, I also deployed to state disasters, managed multi-million-dollar budgets, trained thousands of soldiers in deployments, and earned 18 medals, ribbons, and badges. I honorably retired from the Texas Army National Guard in 2017 with over 20 years of service. And after retirement, I dedicated myself to education. I completed my bachelor's degree in criminal justice administration, and then continued to serve the community, the police department, as a patrol sergeant, a training coordinator. And as a training coordinator, I supervised all department training, provided numerous trainings to the public, to the city staff, managed all TFL and personnel records, wrote multiple grants, and was an involved servant. Some of the community training and city trainings that I completed as a training sergeant for workplace violence and de-escalation, workplace safety, civilian response to active attacks, teen dating violence at schools, bank robbery training at multiple banks, and bag search training for the security guards that are working on special events. Also train city staff in ethics, performance evaluation training, work zone safety, and employee health and wellness. As a training coordinator, I had the opportunity to get our social media platform up and running, implement our current online learning management system, bring in roll call training for the patrol officers, the patrol sergeants to go over the 4 shifts on a weekly basis. And I enrolled in the department in the Texas 1033 program, which is a military recruitment to law enforcement program. I managed to get over hundreds of thousands of dollars in property and equipment through this program for the police department that at the time I could not budget through the budget process. I currently serve as a patrol lieutenant. As a patrol lieutenant, I lead the patrol sergeants and supervise and coordinate all functions of the patrol division. In addition to leading the department, the patrol sergeants, I'm responsible for 25 officers who are the face of the police department. Advocate for department improvements and support the goals and mission of the police department in the city of Fredericksburg. In addition to patrol lieutenant functions, I manage many department budgets, write grants, maintain the department's social media, prepare yearly analysis reports for the state, manage the police department fleet, and participate in many community functions and events. Some of the community involvement that I'm currently in is I'm a law enforcement liaison to the Gray Center, which is a shelter for victims of domestic violence. I'm a committee member on the 175th anniversary committee for the city of Fredericksburg. I participated in the community visioning as the government committee co-chair with one of our current council members. In 2016, I had the honor of attending leadership in Gillespie County and served as Sergeant at Arms. My project that I pitched to Gillespie leadership at the time was the Boys and Girls Club and the playground project that we were able to fund and complete. We successfully put in new basketball courts for paving and other areas for seating, and a playground, and made it a viable and useful space for. I've been a member of the Knights of Columbus since 2012. And Knights of Columbus is known best around here for the best of best. That one-day event raises a lot of money that the Knights of Columbus then distribute to 31 nonprofits, most of them here in the community. And I'm currently a member of the 100 Club of Gillespie County, and I share the social media and club promotions for the 100 Club. My family, this community, the men and women of the police department are my priorities. I hold myself to the highest standards and expect the same standards of those around me. I do my best to always model this behavior. I am grateful for this opportunity and your consideration to serve you as the next chief of police. I believe I meet the qualifications, characteristics needed to successfully lead the police department. I am confident that my passion for service, coupled with my skills and abilities, are a match for the essential job functions of this position. I promise to continue to lead with integrity, uphold the values and the way of life this community expects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Thank you to all the candidates. Now we will move to the question and answer portion of public presentations. Thank you for your comments. We did receive, it looks like 7 or 8 comments, and the majority of those fit into two themes here. So I'm going to lead off with a couple of questions from city staff. And the first one is a lengthy question, and I would like to ask each of you, I'm going to repeat it as many times as I have to until you finally get it. I can even pass it down and let you read it again. We're going to be leading off with Braxton Roemer. So question number 1, again, this is for all of you. One of the concerns that we have heard about the city conducting a recruitment focused only on internal candidates is that internal candidates will not have a focus on improvements that need to be made in the police department in the future. Instead, they will be focused more on the status quo. Please share with us some of your thoughts and ideas on areas that you would consider changing or improving to help take the department to the next level in terms of services to the community. I'll give you a second to digest that. I'll repeat any part of it you like.
I think I got it.
Yes.
So, and that was part of what I mentioned in my presentation is meaningful change. And when I look back over the course of my career, I think everybody sits at the table speak to this, that if I thought in 20 years down the road, law enforcement would look like it does today, I would have never guessed it. It doesn't look anything like it did 20 years ago. And I've told many of the new folks that are standing in here to take a good look at law enforcement right now, because in 20 years, it's not going to look anything like it does now. And the only way that you kind of meet those goals is through change. So status quo is pretty much the opposite of what we're doing. So going back to the last part of your question, I think one of the biggest things that we're going to have to address as a department is growth. And we've been working towards that, as y'all seen, some of you all sitting through the budgets, trying to increase our staffing. We have 1.5 million people that come through our community every year through tourism. So goals will be to finish out our patrol divisions so that we have our patrol divisions staffed with a minimum of 4 officers per shift and a sergeant. To address some of the services that we'd like to offer to our community in the future, we've talked endlessly about a community outreach officer that would serve kind of multi-function so that we can provide. Right now, community outreach is under my division, and as I mentioned, there's a lot of things happening within my division, and having that extra person that can get direct focus to that would be important. What was the last part of the question?
Last part of the question, just some of your thoughts, your thoughts on new initiatives in the department and not just stating status quo.
Right, thank you. So other ways that we've progressed is through technology. So we're seeing more and more about cybercrime, scams, and things like that. We're seeing some increase in crime that's coming from other communities into our own communities. So we are actively right now working towards trying to address that. Technology is booming, and as technology booms to help law enforcement, it's helping criminals. So we have to advance in those fronts if we're actually going to make a difference to those.
Braxton, Brian Vorauer.
When I introduced you, please read the entirety of the question. I got lost in the middle of that somewhere. That's a lot.
Sure, I'll do this for all three of you, no problem. One of the concerns that we have heard about the city conducting a recruitment focused only on internal candidates is that internal candidates will not have a focus on improvements that need to be made in the police department in the future. Instead, they will be focused more on the status quo. Please share some of your thoughts and ideas on areas that you would consider changing or improving to help make the department, take the department to the next level in terms of services to the community.
some of the thoughts that come to mind is I've never been for the status quo. I think I covered a good part of that in my statement. And I think my resume reflects constantly educating myself, going to training, pushing my patrol sergeants to go to training, to get the newest and latest, greatest ideas in law enforcement. And I tell them, not only patrol sergeants and officers, but especially patrol sergeants. When I became patrol lieutenant, I told them, I'm going to push you outside your comfort zone. And that's something that they had to get used to. Because I haven't let up. What I mean by that is I push them to get outside of their box, do some stuff for the community, do stuff that maybe they're not comfortable with, like teaching, instructing, training, going to public events, being a part of the community. But my push is to make that normal. For them to attend training and stay current with current trends, to network with other agencies, to see what they're doing. Are they doing something better? You know, can we adopt that here? Can you bring that back? Bring those nuggets of information back to us so we can stay current, so we can be involved and to make those contacts. So when we're having an issue or we want to look at something that we can all as a department, you know, reach out to those other communities and say, hey, I have this issue, you know, building relationships. Not only for them, I do that as well. I get myself to training every year, meaningful training, bring back that training, those ideas, and share them with the department. Implement stuff around patrol, put up stuff in the building that expresses moving forward and progressing, and be forward-looking, forward-thinking, not staying where we are, status quo. Creating networks not only with other agencies, but other cities, other police departments, other city staff departments within our own city. Creating those networks, and then knowing when and how to use those networks to move the department forward, to come up with new ideas. Growth. Fredericksburg's growing, both in population and in visitors. I think the latest number is 1.5 million. I think some will argue that we're up to 2 million now. But we're growing, and we need to stay with that. Building from the ground up, expanding on the patrol division, having more officers available on the street, not only be involved, but to be proactive, and to be engaged, to be present, visible in the community. For everybody that's visiting here, that we're out and about and we're ready to serve. So growth is definitely something that we'll need to look at. And community outreach, for me, is a department initiative. Community outreach is very important. Being able to stop out on that side of the road, or when somebody's walking, or somebody's riding by, saying hi, having that conversation, instilling that in the patrol division, but not the patrol division, but the whole department. Growing that community outreach. And then improvements. Improvements comes with learning, teaching, training, and leading. And I've always kind of thought of it as that servant leadership is I lead to serve.
Thank you, Brian. Chris, before you ask, I'll go ahead and repeat the question.
I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. All right,
Remember, I'm a teacher, so I make the.
yes, sir. Sorry.
Hey, thanks anyway, sir. All right, so first of all, if you're looking at an officer that's sitting at this table, that is technically as close as you can get as an outsider. Now, remember, when I committed 22 years ago to educate the students of this community, to be a mentor, role model with action, not just with words, be a continual leader for them. Some of these students have been my friends for 22 years. My son, Emmett, holds a middle age, one of my former students who is still in contact today. So when I looked at the budget, realistically, for the very first time, and Steve Wetz said it to me last Friday, this was new to me. This was all different to me. And so I got to be honest with you, I have this insatiable appetite to learn, to educate myself, to be continual learner. I instill that in my students because I promise you, at the age of 50 something, you can still learn a lot. And when you learn things, it makes you energetic. Now, the biggest thing that I see out there for our department is that we have to get our officers, every last one of us has to be involved in the community. Because when you're part of the community, from the moment of the officers to the very top, who would represent the chief of police, the people will get to know you. And when you do that, you tend to want to make sure that you are providing the best for the people that you care about. One of the hardest things about balancing as a police officer is to know that at some point you may have to enforce the law against even people that you have admiration for or that you know. And so when I think about status quo, when I think about what's out there, right now I'm coming into this completely open-minded with every single possibility and opportunity to make the Fredericksburg Police Department the best department out there. Now, here's the way I look at it. I like starting things from the ground up. That has been my history since I got to law enforcement. And again, what I cannot say today, please ask for a copy of my resume, and it will reflect my initiative to always start something from the ground up. One of the things that I learned working in Fredericksburg, Texas, I used to bring people from all over to talk to our students, but I learned every time I learned something new, there was plenty of those people capable of giving that information that reside and work right here in Fredericksburg, Texas. So to me, if I was to become the chief of police, I would reach out and find those people that have the initiative, that have the abilities and the knowledge to work with the Fredericksburg Police Department as a community and as the department. Because when it comes to status quo, it is really that, I'll give you the best example. When I come to school every day to my classes, and I'm there with complete information, I keep them motivated, I have no issue. When I come in the next day, they're ready to go. But if I'm not able to be there for a few days, they have to be ready. And that's kind of where I feel like we have been as a police department. That we're kind of in that direction. I would like nothing more than have the opportunity to bring this back into complete community. Now, when I look at the budget, this is, I'm going to say this in terms, this is all Greek to me, but I'm learning it. I will continue to learn it as I proceed forward, and as long as I'm a potential candidate, and even after that, because part of this, I have to take responsibility to play. But if you're looking for someone who is currently sitting in a position that is with the department, that is closest to the outside looking in, I represent that. And I promise that when I look at it, it will have both the police officers that are currently working with the department and the community in which they serve.
Chris, at this point, I'm going to ask a question from the audience, beginning with Brian Vorauer. Brian, given the increase in the problems with alcohol problems, increased drugs, human trafficking, beyond increasing the numbers of officers and equipment to support them, what does Fredericksburg need in terms of resources to keep our city safe? Sure. Given the increasing problems with alcohol problems, increased drugs, human trafficking, beyond increasing the numbers of officers to deal with this and equipment to deal with this, what does Fredericksburg need in terms of resources to keep our city safe?
Thank you. So to address some of these issues that we're seeing, without additional resources, equipment, personnel, we're going to need community involvement. We're going to need input from the community. I need input from the business owners, from the residents of Fredericksburg. How do we want to approach these issues together? How do we want to tackle these issues? How do we want to address them as a community? Citizens and business owners, city staff, law enforcement, working together to address these issues as a community in order to get a better understanding and maybe a hold of some of these issues if we perceive them to be a problem.
Thank you, Brian. Chris? You got it?
Thank you. Yeah, yes, sir. So, again, with my responsibility of working with youth, I have been able to, fortunately work with a lot of these students as they've grown and watched them go into alcohol addiction, into drug addiction. And part of being in my role, I have experienced with them their changes. When you work with youth, you can see them in one day when things are going really well, and then you can start to see the change in them when you start to realize that they're now becoming more involved with the narcotics that are available to them out there. Now, when it comes to the adults in our community, one of the biggest things that you have to understand is that you're going to have to educate to the things that are out there. You know, I believe that we can create outreach community involvement, where we can educate the adults in the world that are employers to see the side effects or the effects of their employees, to identify that with that information. But when I said earlier that I think about starting things from the ground up, when I consider the addictions of drugs and alcohol in our city limits of Fredericksburg, I can introduce you to at least 10 to 15 former drug addicts that live and reside in Fredericksburg. That's who I go to when I look up for help for students that are struggling with drug addiction. I go to the guys that have been there, that have lived it, and have managed to pull themselves out of the bottom. And I work with them, and I say, look, I have this young person. So it is going to be exactly that. We are going to have to reach out to them. But we are going to have to look at those people that have survived it, that have lived it. Because I'm 53 years old, I've never smoked, I've never chewed, I've never drank, and I'm actually like an anomaly to some people. And they look at me like I'm crazy. But at the same time, I can't walk up to a student that's struggling with addiction and say, this is how you do it, this is how you get better. I can't do that. So I have to rely on those people, the resources that I've made through the years, so that do understand how to get out of an addiction, understand that you're going to fail and you're going to fail again. And those students need to hear that. So I really think, again, it goes back to complete community involvement, working with those people that have experienced it, that have lived it, and by the graces of goodness of God, they have managed to make their way out.
Braxton, can you repeat that?
Sure.
Given the increase in problems with alcohol, drugs, and human trafficking, beyond increasing the number of officers and equipment to support them, what does Fredericksburg need in terms of resources to keep our city safe?
I think the common theme that was mentioned here was community involvement, and I certainly agree with that. I could reiterate everything they just said, but I don't think that's necessary. I think there are some other opportunities that are out there. There's every year, there's tons of funding that comes through grant programs that deal with those very issues that you can put back towards programs within our own community. There are organizations already within our community, private organizations, some government, that deal with those very issues. I think it's important for the police department to develop partnerships with those organizations, or continue our partnerships with them and those programs to address those issues. And lastly, there are lots of regional resources. You know, we always tend to look at Fredericksburg as being an isolated community out in the middle of nowhere. We're not. We're a part of a region, a council of governments. We have agreements with other governments within, and to utilize and leverage our partnerships would also help.
Okay, thank you, Braxton. Okay, back to a question from staff, and this is changing it up just a little bit. Another concern we have that we've recently heard from local citizens is that downtown Fredericksburg is becoming much like 6th Street Austin. A lot of activity, a lot of walking up and down the street, alcohol, sit on the weekends, craziness. What can the city do to help address these concerns in terms of increased enforcement, new regulations, or other steps? And I'll go back to Chris.
Okay, so, when I moved here, I used to run up and down Main Street back when I could really run it. My knees weren't getting so much grief. But I used to enjoy also walking Main Street at night when I was single. I moved here by myself, so I was able to walk Main Street at night. And folks, I can tell you right now, it has changed in the 23 years that I've lived here. However, that change has to rely on the businesses themselves, and it has to work with the police department understanding their businesses. And it has to be, I believe, a coalition of downtown business people that are serving these people, that are serving the community. Because Because here's the deal, we want them to have their business and we want them to be successful in what they do. But at the same time, we have a beautiful town that we wish to hold. I moved here for Fredericksburg, not because I wanted to change it, because it brought me home. I always jokingly tell this story that when I was running one morning, everybody was waving hi at me, and I was like, oh, good morning. It was really shocking. And I really believed that if I rounded the corner, I was going to find Norman Rockwell painting a picture, sitting in the corner. And that is what enticed me and made me heartfelt to believe that Fredericksburg is a great place to live. I really believe that in order for us to work to make the downtown continue to be that, it is going to require the city to create maybe potential ordinances or ways that we can enforce. We can only enforce what exists. But at the same time, I think we need to listen to the business owners, not just necessarily the people that are on the street that are experiencing it. We need to visit with all the above. And I will say this, through the years as a school, doing school programs about alcohol and drugs and community, I would always put it in the newspaper, I would advertise, and I would have a handful of people show up for presentations. I want you to say, I would say this, that if the opportunity arises and we put that out there, then we need you, the community, to show up. We need the direction that you're looking for. And I really think that it's going to be a coalition of your businesses and the owners, the people that work every day. We also need to spend our time as police officers. We need to go downtown and experience what the city visitors and what the city citizens are experiencing. Sometimes we come to work and then we go back home, but we need to experience what they're seeing, because you can't fix what you don't know exists.
Thank you, Chris. Braxton.
Yeah, so obviously over the past 20 years, our economy has changed greatly. We are a community that endorses wineries and alcohol consumption. So to sit here for the police department to say, how do we fix our downtown area when most of our businesses are those type of venues, I think that's a kind of a greater challenge than what the police department is responsible for. I think to get away from some of those, it would take some pretty lengthy discussions. You know, the STR ordinance that came through, we've seen what that process looked like over the past 6 months and how challenging that was. And I would pretty much think that this one will be much greater than that. But as far as the police department goes, I think it's our responsibility to enforce the laws that we have. And I think that we've done a good job of that. We do not have very much tolerance for driving while intoxicated or laws and safety. As far as public intoxication, we enforce that as well. Provided, you know, that those people are dangerous to themselves or others. But as far as the police department is concerned, I think right now all we can do is enforce the laws that we have.
Thank you, Braxton. Brian. Thank you. So I also agree with some of the statements that's already. Fredericksburg has changed. I used to ride my bike to school. I used to ride my bike to town pool. I used to rollerblade and skateboard up and down Main Street. You know, I don't see kids doing that. I wouldn't even let my kid ride his bike to St. Mary's School. That was 10 years ago. Towns change. We're a different community. The police department has changed. We're on with that change. We're Georgetown. We spent since the 1980s promoting ourselves as Georgetown. We attracted individuals from all over the world, which has created new opportunities, new businesses, the new Napa Valley of Texas, several new breweries, wineries, distilleries are all in Fredericksburg and Weston County. So the police department deals with alcohol on a daily basis, whether it's driving while intoxicated, public intoxication, a disturbance because of alcohol, and violence because of alcohol. There are a lot of calls that the patrol officers, patrol sergeants deal with involving alcohol. I do agree to the extent that it's probably a larger problem than just the police department can handle them. So that comes back into community involvement. Who are the stakeholders? What can we do to work with those individuals, to educate, to have an understanding of what the city, what the police department has to deal with, whether it's the intoxicated individuals, whether it's the trash on Main Street, or we've consistently heard over the last 2 years, the intoxicated individuals walking through my front yard. How do we deal with that? The patrol division is very proactive when it comes to alcohol-related offenses. And that's proven in our stats, our police department stats. DWIRS and public intoxication arrests are over half of our total arrests every year. So addressing this issue and community involvement, the business owners, the owners of wineries, distilleries, breweries, and then those organizations in town, again, working with those organizations in town that also address, alcohol, substance abuse, and others that have already been mentioned. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brian. I'm going to move to another question from the audience now. We're going to start off with Braxton. Braxton, the department does many outreach programs to help people and kids connect with our officers. What new programs would you like to start?
That's a good question. I've been a part of a lot of those programs, with our summer youth, spending summers with them, with our kids, things happening in school. So to come up with new ones, I mean, it's challenging. I think one thing that kids always could use, especially some kids more than others, are mentorship programs. I think those are things that the police department could be a part of. We've done some things, I think, Officer Ayala does some things with the older kids, with making familiarity with the police department. We talked about Officer Bravo, going through criminal justice, but I think some of that needs to start not necessarily criminal justice in the schools at a younger age, but at a younger age, officers being more involved with those younger kids, getting them comfortable, starting very young as law enforcement. When I grew up, I was always afraid of police officers. Never thought I would actually become one until I got older. So one of the first ones I met, he wanted to pretend to put handcuffs on me, and I decided not to do that. So I think that anything that we can do as far as that relationship from a very young age, starting with those youngers, I know that our SROs do that, and probably our patrol officers, and some of the staff, they take a more active role in creating that. So, I may not be able to name off in this moment a specific program, but connecting with kids at a younger age, I think is the important thing, whatever that program.
Braxton, next we will go to LT Brian Vorauer. Brian, do you need to repeat the question? Okay.
No, sir, thank you. So this is one of those nuggets of information that I brought back from a leadership supervisory training course I took a couple of years ago. And the patrol sergeants are very aware of this because I constantly push them and make them keep track of community involvement by themselves and by their patrol officers. It's one of the things that I've tasked them to do for the past 3 years as patrol, is to stop out at that public event, stop out at the park, any open party to the public, open events, any high school activities, high school sports games, almost required that they stop by there. When they stop in, the sergeant records that or makes note that the officer stopped at this, this event or made contact with a family in the park. Just this past week, when I was at training, College Station, I got a text from Chief and it said, "Hey, pass along to Officer Dustin Schutz. Thanks for stopping out with that family at the park. They really appreciate it." I have no idea who the family was. The Chief didn't say, but apparently that family knew Chief and that got relayed. So it's taking place. It's happening. They're encouraged to do it. That community involvement is huge. I've been pushing it, practicing it as a patrol lieutenant with my patrol division for the last 3 years. Also, mentorship. Everyone mentioned it. Having a mentor is huge. Probably didn't realize, that until several years ago. We always had, support, family support, professional support, people you go to, you trust, ask questions. But having an actual mentor, asking somebody to be a mentor. And if that's something that the department can do at a certain level, whether it starts with patrol or special services or inside the school, but actually developing a program. Now we have several officers that are willing to be mentors to the kids or to the public in general. And then I've always been interested in Mayor Key mentioned the reading program. I think maybe coupling officer mentorship or officer reading in the schools to the young kids might start to foster some of those relationships and those outreach programs that can grow from programs that are already in place that we just need to get. Thank you.
Okay, Chris?
Yes, sir. So, this has been my forte is working with you for the past 22 years. And one of the first things that I learned working with you is that I went in there to be an instructor. I was going to teach. I was going to make sure they passed the test. I got to be quite honest with you, and I wouldn't send other teachers back because I thought I was bad. And so I sat down, and one of the first things I started doing to improve my lectures and improve my teaching overall was I listened to the source. I asked the students, what do you really want to know about law enforcement? What do you really want to know what we do? And I asked them. So to me, I think we need to start with the source, and that's the youth of this community. We need to give them an opportunity to come into our police department, sit down, and that's a group, it could be small, it could be large, and ask them what they want, what they're looking for. One of the things that I really, I was on the board of directors of Boys and Girls Club. I was here when it was the Hill Country Youth Center, and we eventually I was on the board when we adopted the actual name of when we took on the national level of the Boys and Girls Club. And those kids at that time, when we asked them what they said, we want a half pipe. We want a half pipe for skateboarding. So we built it and we made it happen. But if we don't ask the students or the young folks what they want, again, we have to understand they're our future. And if we're going to teach them how to become public members, we got to give them the opportunity to speak. The other thing that they have said recently is, and I have to agree with them, is that we need skate guards. So, the skate park is pretty much open downtown at the basketball league, so there's really no adult leadership there. And some of the kids that want to go and enjoy the skate park, that truly want to go and be at the skate park, they have said that the mix of it is to a point where they're not really able to enjoy it. A lot of them said they have started to avoid it. And I think that we need to listen to what those students are saying, what the young folks are saying in the community. But folks, when they speak, we need to react. And we need to interact with them, and we need to take on every responsibility to make sure that you realize that when they speak, they are being heard.
Hey, thank you, Chris. And I just had a couple of extra questions submitted here. So we have 2 more questions. So second to last question here. We are leading off with Brian with this question. What would you say is the number one issue Fredericksburg currently faces? Number one issue.
I'm having a lot of time to think about it. I would say the number one issue the city faces right now is our popularity. It's the influx of tourism, the tourists. I mean, you know, how do we manage that? You know, how do we manage all the individuals that want to come to our great town and enjoy what we have here, enjoy our community, but keeping it safe and clean, orderly for everyone that attends, not only for the attends, but for the community. How do we address it, but also address the community's needs when it comes to, you know, noise, trash, or parking, a lot of the SDR issues that we've been covering for the last 2 years, doing all the ordinance revisions. So addressing the tourism that's coming here, working as a city to make sure that we're also addressing the citizens' needs and the needs of the individuals that live inside the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, Chris.
I'm not going to disagree with that our tourism is probably our most important income, and it's also our biggest concern as a city, and definitely as a police department. But I'm one of those guys that I'm blessed to hang out with people that are in the 21st century when it comes to social media. Folks, if you haven't learned how to use your cell phone to get information to people out there, you're missing the boat. I think one of the things is when people go to visit another town, they are literally visiting the town. They're not visiting the people. And I think that what we need to do with our social media abilities as a technology, utilizing it, is to start putting the people of Fredericksburg to where people that are visiting realize that we, the good people of Fredericksburg, want you to come to Fredericksburg. We want you to be a part of Fredericksburg, but we want to remind you that while you're here, we still live in Fredericksburg. We want to make sure that we look at talking out there. I'm really big on putting out information so that there's no misunderstanding. Knowledge is huge. Knowledge eliminates confusion. And when we think about the idea of the task of keeping that many people coming to Fredericksburg having a lot of business hours, it's a balance. But I also agree, though, we are advertising for them to come. We should make a part of that advertisement of who they're coming to see. These are the people that are enjoying this town. We want you to be here. No difference than if we were to invite your guests to your home, that you would say, hey, this is my home, and these are my expectations while I'm in your home. And I think that if we can get that message out to those people that are visiting us in Fredericksburg, knowing that we support their visit, we support the fact that they are supplying businesses with income, but we also want them to respect the fact this is our home. And we need to make sure that they receive that message in a very polite and a very courteous idea.
Chris, Braxton.
Yeah, obviously Fredericksburg has seen a lot of growth over the years, and that kind of economic growth is a good thing. But along with it, is the cost of living in Fredericksburg is extremely high. And with that being said, it's very difficult for people to move into our community to fill some of the vacant jobs that we have. We see that same challenge in our own police department. We have many of our officers that are commuting from other parts of the, not even the county, other counties, coming from Johnson City, Kerrville, San Antonio. So that is a big challenge for our community. There's other, I think anywhere you go, you see how wanted ads, and filling those, for people to fill those positions to be able to live here is something that we need to overcome as a community.
Thank you. One final question, and as I'm asking this question, I also want you to be thinking about closing remarks before this question. So last question, with very few women in the department, do you have any plans to help recruit more women, especially if it relates to mentoring? I will start with Chris.
Okay, so absolutely, one of the things as being an instructor teaching criminal justice, if you look at the students that are participating in my programs, we do competitions ranging from building search to crime scene investigation to 7-step violator contact to felony style traffic stop. I always encourage the females to participate in every competition that gentlemen will compete in. Now, I'm going to say this, that we need female officers in law enforcement. There's no question about it. I have several young ladies that are interested in applying now. They're at the age. I've asked them to contact the office to fill out the applications. When it comes to being a female, one of the biggest things is and one of them, you know, she's 5'2", but she looks at me and goes, "Y'all, there's no way I can take you." I said, "And we're not just going to throw you to the wolves. We're going to train you. We're going to give you some really cool equipment. We're going to educate you. We're going to make sure that when you do hit the streets as a patrol officer, you are given the equipment and the knowledge and the ability to do so." I think we need to start drawing in more female officers into the Fredericksburg law enforcement division here. And I think it starts with the opportunity. And when we think of mentoring, right now, there are several young ladies that are considering law enforcement in our community. I would love to see them grow with our community because they're from here. They have family here, they're connected here. And I think that's an important approach if we're going to get that number of females involved. Now, when I say mentoring and role model, I would like to say that I'm a huge male role model, but I got to be honest with you, and my wife will attest to that, is that a lot of females have looked up to me and have asked me for advice. And to this day, some of these ladies are in 30-something years later, and they call me and say, "Hey, I have this kid issue. What do you think?" I think that we as men, role models, we need to accept the fact that we can't be role models to males, but we can also be very positive role models to the females and encourage females in our community and outside to become a part of Fredericksburg Police Department.
Chris, back to Braxton.
So the Special Services Division does a lot of the recruiting, if not all the recruiting for the police department. And that is something I've spoken about a lot, is having more females, because currently we have one female that's active in our department and one that just retired. And it's not that we discriminate against females or anything like that. We just don't receive tons of female applicants in our recruiting process. We currently have one female that's in our background. Hopefully things will go well, because I see value to having females in the police department. There's things that they can do that men cannot. So having that is an asset. But I think first and foremost, anytime that we're hiring for the police department, before any other thing, any kind of race, gender, or anything like that, the most important thing is finding people that fit our values and meet our standards as people. But when we can find females that are able to meet those standards and go through, we're always open to hire.
Thank you, Braxton. Brian?
So I've actively recruited a couple of the female officers or applicants that are currently going through the process. One of them tested with us years ago, and then she currently tested with us again. It's going through the background. I approached her throughout those years between that gap and was constantly asking her, "Why don't you come work for us? Why don't you come work for us?" She was working for another agency. And I was like, "You live here, your family's here, you're commuting somewhere else, you need to come work for us." So I actively recruit females. We have a need for females in the patrol division and in the department as a whole. But I'll speak for patrol. I have my patrol officers, my patrol sergeants now asking for female officers. If we could have one female officer on every patrol shift, the patrol men or like that'd be great. Because like Lieutenant Roemer said, a female officer can do things that a male officer cannot, or a male officer just does not want to do because it's uncomfortable. And then some individuals that we deal with, just don't want to speak to a male officer. They ask for a female officer. They're more comfortable with a female officer. And then, having to tell somebody, sorry, we don't have a female officer on duty, or we just don't have a female officer available. You see that individual shut down. It makes it just that much harder, to make sure that we're providing the best service possible to that individual. So, actively recruiting females and trying to get more females on patrol and in the police department as a whole.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you to all three of the candidates. At this point, we will get into having each candidate make their final comments. I'll give each one of you 3 to 5 minutes to provide your comments. But before you do, I wanted to say thank you to the audience for submitting your questions, your very thoughtful questions. Again, we'll keep track of all of the questions we received tonight and log those. So starting off with closing comments, Braxton Roemer.
Thanks. Well, first off, I can't tell you how challenging this process is. You should probably see it. All three of us squirming up here trying to answer your questions. And I think all three of us up here, we have the best interest of our city, the people that live here, our department at heart. We're going to do the best that we can for our community. I appreciate each one of you coming here, listening to what we have to say, asking your questions, and I think I can speak for the three of us that in more in-depth conversations with some of the questions with some prep time is we're open to do that if you have something that come down the road. But thank you very much for considering me for the position, and thank you for being here.
Braxton Brian Vorauer.
Sure. Again, thank you, Mayor, Council, city staff, community, and especially my family for all your support. This is an honor, and it's humbling. Very, very honored to be here, to be able to speak to you, to be able to apply for this position, to be able to serve my community in this capacity. It's just humbling, so thank you. As far as closing comments, didn't have anything prepared, but basically, I'm a servant leader, been involved in the community, look out for my people, try to do what's best for the community, the city, the department, and my patrol officers. And I just try to do my duty, go home on it, and take care of people.
Okay, thank you, Brian. So Chris, time was described.
Oh, come on.
So you'd be the last one.
I appreciate that.
So,
The last thing that starts with the name, pretty much know you're going to go first.
right, so Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. But first of all, again, I want to remind you as the people that are watching on the internet and then those in this room, I can't even begin to tell you how humbled I am to be sitting on this at this table with these two gentlemen here, and the amount of people that have taken the time out of their evening to find out and seek out the best interest for the city of Fredericksburg and the future choice of the chief of police of Fredericksburg, Texas. For 29 years as a law enforcement, I will tell you, I enjoyed the pursuits. I enjoyed the physical fights and all that stuff because I was a young guy. But I'm going to tell you that the biggest challenge I have faced in my career has been the last 22 years, mostly because you as a community have entrusted me to watch over your children, to educate them, to lead them, to listen to them, to cry with them, to laugh with them, and make some of the greatest memories I have as a patrol officer. And I'm going to say this, it sounds like a lot of fun, but it's very, very difficult. I brag on Prado and Preston Schmidt. Preston Schmidt is assigned to the middle school, and Officer Prado is assigned to the elementary. Now, I will tell you this, that when I tell everyone that takes on this role, I always tell them, be prepared to be tired. And now that they've done this for about 6 months each of them looks at me and says, how have you done this for so long? What is wrong with you? Well, what is wrong with me is that I have a big heart for this community. And here's the deal, if you look at the future, you got to start way down at the elementary. We are blessed that we now have an officer at the elementary who's doing great things and making great strides, besides getting cookies and cakes from a teacher. We also have a middle school officer, Preston Smith, who's making great strides with the middle school kids. He gets out there, they know him and they like him. And then for me at the high school, I would like to see a second officer added to the program. I think that when I look at what I do in the classroom, it can only be met as long as we keep doing that program. I think we do need 2 officers, one that can continue to float the hallways. But the big thing I really think for us as a department, that every officer should have the experience of working with youth for longer than 5 minutes, 10 minutes, or a day. They really need to experience who's out there and who they are working with. Because I can assure you, as I can prove to you, in any law enforcement officer, the odds of the person that I deal with today will probably be connected to someone else I will deal with tomorrow. And in order to make that link work, like I said earlier, when you work with the youth, you work with grandparents, you work with aunts and uncles, you work with the entire system. And I think we have a great system, and I'm very proud to call Fredericksburg, Texas, my home.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you to all 3 of our candidates. I just wanted to say that it's an honor and it's a very humbling experience for me to be sitting up here interviewing the 3 of you in this forum. And thank you everyone in the audience for your interest in this position in the community. Thank you for being here tonight. How about another round of applause for this one? I'm going to hand it back over to the mayor for any further comments or.
Oh, what a comment, thank you, This